The floor usually becomes storage before anyone even notices it happening. That's the strange part of clutter. It doesn't normally begin with some big failure or a dramatic mess. It begins with something being put down for a minute. A shopping bag beside a chair. A parcel near the front door. Clothes that are not quite dirty enough for the wash, but not quite clean enough to go back in the wardrobe. A charger with no real place to live. Then a few days go by, and the room starts teaching you something without saying a word. It starts teaching you that the floor is available. And once that idea settles in, clutter tends to move faster. That is why some of the most useful Japanese-inspired storage ideas are not really about tidying in the dramatic sense. They are more about stopping that slow drift before it turns into a pattern. They make it less likely that objects will start spreading sideways across your life. And that matters because floor clutter is never only visual. It creates these small hesitations all through the day. You step around things. You delay decisions. You keep clocking what still needs sorting. A room can start to feel mildly unfinished, even when you have been trying. So this is not really about perfection. It is about shaping a home in a way that makes the easier choice the better one. 7 storage rules that can stop floor clutter before it gets going. The first rule is very simple. The floor is not a waiting area. That sounds obvious. But a lot of clutter behaves as though it has been given temporary permission. Things are not there forever. They are just there for now. And that little phrase, "for now," is usually where the problem begins, because the mind gets used to what it sees. If a bag stays against the wall for 3 days, it stops feeling temporary. It starts to feel normal. It becomes part of the room. In many Japanese homes, especially smaller ones, there is a practical respect for space itself. Open floor space is not treated as wasted space. It has a job. It allows movement, cleaning, calm, flexibility. A room works better when that space is still available. In everyday terms, that means drawing a firmer line in your own mind. The floor is for walking, sitting, stretching, cleaning, living, not for things that are waiting to be dealt with. So when something lands there, the question is not, can this stay here until later? It is, where does this actually belong? That small change in thinking can shift the whole feel of a room. The second rule is that every portable object needs somewhere to land above floor level. Most floor clutter appears because certain objects do not have an easy resting place nearby. Not because they have nowhere at all, just nowhere obvious nearby and easy enough to use in the moment. A tote bag may technically belong in a cupboard upstairs, but if you come home tired and there is nowhere near the entrance to hang it, it will probably end up on the floor. Not because you are lazy, because the room asked for too much at the wrong time. This is where Japanese-inspired home design often feels quietly sensible. It pays attention to movement. Things are stored where they are used and where they naturally arrive, not where they seem ideal in theory. So it helps to think in terms of landing places. A hook for the bag you use most days. A narrow shelf for parcels that still need opening. A basket on a side table for things that are heading back out. A tray for slippers instead of a loose pile near the door. None of that is dramatic, but it reduces the number of unfinished decisions you carry around in the background. When a place is visible, close by, and easy to use, the item is much more likely to end up there. The third rule is to store vertically before you store widely. Floor clutter spreads because horizontal space invites more of itself. One thing becomes 3, then 5. Then, before long, a loose little category appears in a corner where no category was meant to exist. Vertical storage cuts across that pattern. It uses walls, the backs of doors, narrow shelves, the side of a wardrobe, the edge of a cupboard. It gives things somewhere to go without letting them spread outward across the room. That does not mean turning your home into some kind of storage display. It just means noticing that many everyday items do not need floor space. They need access. Bags, umbrellas, cleaning tools, reusable shopping bags, headphones, hats, coats. A lot of these things work better hung up or stored upright than dropped in a vague corner and half forgotten. There's a simple behavioral reason for that. When objects sit higher up and are easy to see, they're easier to process and easier to return. Once they sink into a low pile, they create both visual noise and retrieval friction. You stop really seeing them, and at the same time they become harder to deal with properly. Vertical storage gives things a clearer outline. You can see them, reach them, put them back without much effort. And that matters more than people often think. The fourth rule is that the return path needs to be easier than the drop. This may be the most important rule of the whole set. Most people do not create clutter because they do not care about order. They create clutter because putting something back asks for slightly more effort than dropping it nearby. The cupboard is too full. The drawer sticks. The basket is tucked away. The hangers are in the wrong room. The shelf is too high. The system might look sensible, but it asks too much in the exact moment the habit needs to happen. A lot of Japanese-inspired organization works well for this reason. It often leans towards ease of use rather than visual ambition. Less cramming, less overstacking, less dependence on getting everything exactly right. More attention to whether the system can survive ordinary life. A useful question is this: can you put something away with one hand in a few seconds while slightly distracted? If the answer is no, the system may simply be too demanding. For some things, an open basket works better than a lidded box. A hook works better than a hanger. A shelf with a bit of space on it works better than a beautifully optimized drawer that becomes annoying after 2 days. If the return feels light, the habit is far more likely to hold on tired evenings and rushed mornings. That is what you want. The fifth rule is to create thresholds, not just rooms. A lot of floor clutter builds up near doorways, beside beds, next to sofas, under dining chairs. And usually that is not random. Those are transition points, places where people arrive, pause, take things off, put things down, change state. In Japanese homes, the genkan is a familiar example of a deliberate threshold. It marks the shift from outside to inside. You do not need to recreate that exactly, but the principle is useful. A well-functioning home pays attention to transitions. So instead of seeing clutter as random, it helps to look at where it keeps appearing. That pile by the front door may not be a bad habit in the abstract. It may simply be a threshold that has never been properly supported. The chair covered in clothes may not be laziness. It may be an unplanned middle point between wearing and storing. The things on the bedroom floor are often tied to that moment between getting home and properly changing over into the evening. When you look at clutter that way, the solutions become more specific. A hook rail near the entrance. A laundry basket where clothes actually come off, not where you wish they came off. A small valet hook in the bedroom for tomorrow's outfit instead of a growing heap. A tray for the things that leave the house in the morning. The point is not to force better behavior through willpower. It is to support the point where behavior already happens. The sixth rule is to reduce the number of things competing for the same bit of space. Sometimes floor clutter is not really a storage problem at all. It is a volume problem wearing a storage disguise. If a hallway is trying to hold 6 bags, several coats per person, sports kit, parcels, seasonal shoes, and a few random things that belong elsewhere, no clever organizer is going to solve that for long. This is where a quieter, more practical version of Japanese minimalism can be useful. Not the aesthetic version people post online, the everyday version. Keep what is useful. Keep what is used. And be careful about how much you ask a small space to hold without protest. The fewer things competing for prime everyday storage, the easier it is to keep a room orderly without much effort. That does not mean living with almost nothing. It means being more selective about what gets convenient placement. The shoes you actually wear most days can live by the entrance. Out-of-season ones do not need to. The current bag gets the hook. The older ones do not all need to hover nearby. Children's everyday things can stay accessible, but broken toys and half-abandoned clutter do not need to keep claiming the same valuable ground. Space is a resource, and when everything gets front-row access, the floor usually ends up absorbing the overflow. The 7th rule is to reset the room at the smallest useful scale. A lot of people imagine tidying as a big event, something you gear yourself up for, a weekend task, a proper clear-out. But floor clutter is usually created in fragments, which means it is often best prevented in fragments too. A short reset, done at the right time, is often enough. There is a practical idea in many Japanese daily routines that small acts of maintenance matter, not because they are virtuous, and not because they turn life into a ritual, simply because they stop disorder from settling in and becoming normal. A 2-minute reset in the evening is usually easier than a 40-minute rescue at the weekend. The useful part is keeping that reset narrow, not tidy the whole room. More like clear the floor before bed. Put away anything below knee height. Reset the entrance after dinner. Empty the bedroom chair. Return the things that have drifted. These small resets work because they are specific. You can see when they are done. They do not ask for a huge burst of energy, and they are still manageable when you are tired. There is something else as well. A clear floor changes the emotional feel of a room very quickly. You might still have papers on the desk or washing up in the kitchen, but once the floor is open again, the whole space feels more settled. Your body reads it differently. It feels easier to begin again the next day. And that is really the deeper point behind all 7 rules. They are not about becoming the kind of person who never leaves anything out. They are about removing the small permissions that allow clutter to gather speed. They make disorder less convenient, and they make order easier to repeat. So if your floors keep filling up, it helps to ask a gentler and more useful question. Not, why can't I stay organized? But what in this room keeps making the drop easier than the return? Because when a home is working with you, discipline does not have to carry the whole load. The bag meets a hook. The shoes meet a tray. The clothes meet a basket. The room begins to guide the behavior instead of quietly fighting it. And that is often what lasting order looks like. Not intensity, not a dramatic reset every few weeks, just a series of small, sensible decisions built into the shape of ordinary life. What looks simple from the outside can seem almost unimpressive. But simple is often what lasts. And in the end, the homes that stay calmer are usually not the ones with the strictest rules. They are the ones where the next right action is easy enough to happen without much thought at all.